and welcome everyone. And my name is Yvette DeBow Salcedo, for those of you who may not know me. And I work with the Baconic Land Trust, and I'll be the host for the program. So I'll be, doing a couple of things, but showing you some beautiful images that have been prepared also by the artists today. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm really excited for tonight's program and to be partnering the Land Trust with the Southampton Arts Center as part of its Earth Artists as Activists exhibition. And so I'm going to make a plea. If you have not had a chance to experience the show, I strongly urge you to make the time for a visit before it closes on July 11th. And I'll give Daniela a few minutes to talk about it too, but I saw it today actually, and it was breathtaking. And I encourage you, look up, look down, look all around, because the work is everywhere and it's visually inspiring. So imaginative and thought-provoking, and a really immersive environment. The team at the center are truly creating remarkable engagements in this important space in the heart of Southampton Village. And Daniela Kromeyer, as I mentioned before, is here from the center today. And in a few minutes, I'll invite her in to welcome you tonight as well. But we appreciate everyone for joining us tonight, and appreciate many of you for joining us at programs throughout the past year as we brought to you many experiences through Zoom. Like many of you, we at the Trust are eager to have programs in person again, but we have also found that Zoom has given us the opportunity to gather people from far and wide. And for that, we are grateful. Tonight's program features 4 incredible artists who have all works in the show: Cindy Pease Roe and Sherwood Pundyk, Scott Bluedorn, along with Kathryn Szoka, who will also serve as our moderator for tonight's conversation. And our thanks to Kathryn, Cindy, Ann, and Scott for sharing your art and inspiration with us and the community. Your works and their connection to nature and the environment make a profound difference in illuminating the benefits of nature for all of us. And I truly hope that everyone has been healthy over these past few months. And from all of us at the Trust, we wish you and your family and friends the best, and are grateful that you are choosing to spend a little time with us this evening. On a housekeeping note, you are muted during the conversation, but at the end we'll be answering questions from the audience. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to post a question, and we'll try to answer as many of these as possible. And as always, I give a little bit about the Land Trust. As you know, the Trust was founded in 1983 with a mission to conserve Long Island's working farms, natural lands, and heritage for our communities now and in the future. And with your help, as well as the support of thousands of individuals, partner organizations, foundations, community groups, and all levels of government, we've been able to accomplish a lot. It is with your support that we've been able to protect over 13,000 acres of land, including over 6,000 acres of farmland that is available to farmers growing food and many other agricultural products. The Trust work is varied, from protecting working farms, providing leasing programs to new and established farmers to grow food, to our work with food pantries, to conserving woodlands, wetlands, and meadows that impact biodiversity, wildlife habitat, and protect our drinking water, to making preserves in places like Bridge Gardens available to the public to explore and take a breath. All of which also we hope provides inspiration to artists, which we'll hear a little bit about tonight, and would not be possible without your support. And now I'd like to introduce Daniela Kromeyer from the Southampton Arts Center to join me in the welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here tonight. We are delighted to be partnering with the Baconic Land Trust yet again. I am the programming coordinator for Earth, Artists as Activists. As Yvette said, the show is up till July 10th. It was curated by Amy Kerwin. It is a timely, important, and actionable multidisciplinary exhibition featuring artists who use their talents to focus on environmental conservation and activism, whether through painting, sculpting, photography, film, music, prose, or other forms of artistic expression. We would like to also thank and acknowledge our presenting sponsor, Douglas Elliman. Please be sure to explore our website to learn more about upcoming Earth programs, including a wonderful talk we'll be having with Dr. Carl Safina and members of his Safina Center on June 24th, as well as wonderful documentary film series screened outdoors on our lawn, including July 8th, which we focus on sustainable seas and fishing practices with a phenomenal panel, and My Octopus Teacher, a delightful film I think many of you probably have seen, but to see it on the big screen is going to be very special. And our One Ocean film tour is coming back as well. So be sure to stay tuned for all of the great programming. And again, I want to thank the wonderful staff at PLT, and especially Yvette for coordinating tonight's event.
Well, thanks, Daniela. And I actually will give a shout out to Kathy Kennedy. Kathy Kennedy is our senior outreach manager, and she has been pulling together these programs for us and work with Daniela. We've really enjoyed the partnership with the center, and we look forward to many, many more. And so now I'd like to introduce our moderator and friend of the trust with a big thank you to her, Kathryn Szoka. Kathryn is an amazing photographer and storyteller through her work. I've known her for many years through the connection with the trust and with the artists of plein air Peconic. So a little bit more about Kathryn. She's a photographer of communities in transition. Her longitudinal essay, The Vanishing Landscape series, documents the remaining farmlands of Eastern Long Island. Other photographic essays include Life Along the Turnpike, Bridgehampton Today, which documents the African-American community for the Bridgehampton Museum, and Black and Green, Life in Pennsylvania Cold Patch, and Crooked Knee, documenting the last year of her father's life. Kathryn exhibits at the Robin Rice Gallery in New York. She is a member of Plein Air Peconic, as I mentioned before, working with the trust to visualize our efforts to maintain active farmland and biodiverse habitats. So with that, I'm going to turn over the program to Kathryn with a final reminder to everyone. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to pose a question. If you have technical issues, please use the chat and we'll try to resolve them as quickly as possible. And we'll turn to the questions at the end of the program. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kathryn.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Yvette. Thank you, Daniela. Thanks everyone at the Land Trust and also at the Southampton Arts Center. Really appreciate your works, and it's interesting to see both institutions evolve over time to meet the needs that are very relevant in our community. And with that in mind, I really do want to start with a land acknowledgement and to acknowledge that we all, those who live on the East End, live on Shinnecock land, and we owe a debt to them for their stewardship of the land for millennial, and we now also owe our help and aid to allow them to get some of the properties that are theirs back into their stewardship. So I just want to give a shout out to our friends at the Shinnecock Nation. Thank you. So the title of this is Contrasting Expressions of Nature. And we have 4 artists here that work in very different ways. And some of them actually themselves go into different, explore different avenues in their own artistic endeavors. So we're going to start by allowing, well, first of all, I just want to give you a heads up. We're probably going to be sharing the screen during most of the presentation so that you're aware of it, so that you'll be looking at the art as opposed to our faces, I guess, because that might get a little bit old after a while. But we're going to start by having each of us kind of describe a little bit about our artistic process. And we're going to use as a foundation for that discussion one of the pieces that's actually in the SAC show right now. So I'd like to actually start with Scott Bluedorn and ask him if he would talk about one of the pieces that he has on exhibit. So tell us a little bit about your process, Scott.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. And my name is Scott Bluedorn. I'm from East Hampton, born and raised. And the piece that you're going to see in a second here is called Interconnection. And what I primarily do as an artist is paint and draw. And I do a lot of other things that kind of relate to painting and drawing and different media, but these are kind of my main forms of communication. And this piece in particular is actually about it's about trees and their lifeways and the way that they are interconnected as above and so below. And I actually wanted to really connect this idea to the mythical idea of the labyrinth, and what it means to actually work with a labyrinth is you walk the path to the center, and you're not meant to get lost as in a maze, but you're actually meant to find yourself in the center. And this is a centering piece, and trees kind of do that for me as like as an organism. So again, this is also about rebirth and the interconnection of a person or me or anyone or the viewer with the natural world, and finding that natural world through the device of a labyrinth, which you can see the roots there.
If I could just interject, Scott, I mean, I think I see in your work a great deal of imagination, and I just wondered if you could just talk about like how, let's say the spark of this particular artwork, where did it come from? How, did you just pick up pencil, put it to paper, and it started?
Yeah, this particular piece, I was actually walking in the woods in Hither Woods, and there was a really extremely beautiful oak tree. It was kind of silhouetted against the rest of the trees. So it was kind of a very special one. And I did take a lot of photographs, and I work from photographs mainly when I'm drawing. So this tree you'll see in front of you is an actual, I believe it was either a white oak or a black oak in Hither Woods. And I often combine things in my drawing where I'll take something that I directly observe, maybe from the natural world, and pair it with something that's artificial or man-made, and I like to actually set up kind of a juxtaposition between those things. So here, a labyrinth, I always look for labyrinths when I'm traveling, and you might be familiar. There's actually one also in Montauk that was set up in the Eddie Ecker Park. It's a beautiful labyrinth, and it looks a little bit like this one, but instead of roots, it's made out of rocks. So this was a combination of real life and the imagined.
It's lovely. I mean, first of all, the artistic talent is evident, and just the imagination and pulling that together, really, really lovely. Thank you. And how about you? Do you want to talk a little bit about your own artistic process?
Sure. I'm Anne Sherwood Pundyk. I'm based in Mattatuck on the North Fork. And as I was listening to Scott talk about his piece, I was thinking of that there was commonality. This is a painting on unstretched canvas. It's called "The Seed Knows How to Wait," which is a quote from a book called The Overstory. It's about the importance of biodiversity, but the inspiration for this painting, well, I should say I work on unstretched canvas, and this is a fairly large painting. It's, you can step into it. It's a sort of an immersive feeling to the painting. When you stand in front of it, it surrounds you. And Scott was talking about the labyrinth, the sense of kind of meditative shapes that you can trace with your body through walking, or and it becomes a connection to sort of brain patterns and habits that take you sort of out of the present day or the present moment and into a place where we can see interconnections, but between ourselves and nature. So the processes I use, I pour the paint, the canvas is on the floor. In some cases, I seam sections of canvas together. And I'm interested in the way, just for example, like the cloud formations behind you, Kathryn, paint left to its own devices will create patterns that mimic, like a leaf, the veins in a leaf, or water patterns. So I like to use a sort of contouring of the materials. And, I'm directed a lot by color as an association with emotion. So there's a narrative of a kind of, if you think of mood shifts and different sorts of engagements with, how we feel and what we see. So the three rings, which obviously are, it's a device that grew out of a sort of series of doodles and drawings, but it's this archetypal sense of parts that become exhibit a sort of unity. So that's I guess that's sort of an introduction to how, my painting process.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, there's a contrast between the let's say the watercolor nature of the ground, and then the hard edge of the circles, which creates a bit of a kind of a dialogue between the two forms on the canvas, which I think is very successful. Just a question, Andy, you know, of course we all know about the Pollock drip paintings, but I'm just curious, you talk about how the drips kind of form shapes that might simulate or emulate clouds or leaf veins. It is in honing your technique, have you discovered ways in which you can, let's say, favor that to happen?
Yeah, I feel like my studio is a little bit like a laboratory where I pay very close attention to, for example, you know, the densities of the paint and the dilutions, and I have all sorts of different tools, you know, spray bottles or you know, different ways to, in a sense, control the uncontrollable. I sometimes take the paintings outside. I have there's a hillside outside my studio, and I use the slant of the hill and gravity to form, so, you know, to create these sort of rivulet shapes that appear. So it's very important to me that I don't control everything about what is happening in the painting. I want that sense of sort of freedom of the materials, and I think that is conveyed to the viewer when, you know, when they see it, and it's almost a little unsettling, or it can be joyful or upsetting, but it's the sense of authenticity of the materials that I like.
Thanks for mentioning that. I mean, I think in all art, you know, the sense of mystery and the unknown is essential to the creative process. And so we've just seen two very different processes from looking at Scott and Anne's work. And now let's turn to Cindy Pease Roe, who has yet another very creative way of bringing art to us all, and with a strong environmental message. Cindy, you're on the North Fork too. Why don't you talk a little bit about your work, please?
Hi, thank you, Kathryn. And I do want to thank Peconic Land Trust and Southampton Arts Center for organizing this. It's a really wonderful way for all of us to be able to talk about our work. So thank you. Yeah, so I live on the North Fork. I live in Greenport, New York, but I also lived on the South Fork for a while. And that also has informed my work. This work in particular is called Big Daddy, and it's a North Atlantic bluefin tuna. And it is made from marine plastics that are picked up off the beach. So 100% of what you see has come off the beach. And I have several slides here just to show you my process a little bit, because it's all about, that's the other side. So no two sides are alike in my sculptures. Nothing can ever be repeated because everything is entirely unique as it comes in off the beach. And as we get a little bit closer up into it, you can see that it starts with, in this case, we're building the armature and we've stuffed it with water bottles. So we start with the story right there to talk about one-use water bottles and the problem that we have with plastics washing up on our beach and our use of one-use water bottles right there in particular. And I think we've got another one of, and there's a close-up of the tuna itself. And so the tuna, each one of my sculptures comes with a tag that says 100% unnatural ingredients. And then it tells you what we have used in here. So in this case, to give you an idea, we have bottles, rope, stuffing, sandbags, beach chair fabric and strappings, mylar balloons, netting, miscellaneous plastics, bottle caps, filters, beach umbrella, knife holster, inflatable styrofoam, straw, some part of a crock, you know, that you wear, plastic plates, plastic cutlery, lobster trap pieces, beach bucket, baseball caps, fishing gloves, cell phone case, sunglasses, balloon ribbons, combs, hair clips, cups, pill bottles, fishing tags, plastic flowers, and eel pop material, vinyl siding, and a bubble wand.
Wow.
So what we do is we'll have a clipboard next to us in the studio as we're working, and we keep track of what we're putting in there all the time. For people who want to look a little bit more at Big Daddy, We did do a video on it so that you can find that on my website to see how we built it out. And we're starting to do more of that in the studio to record the process of it, because that really does show people what we're working with. And that's the important message of this work. People are attracted to it. They see it, but they don't understand what it's made from. And that's kind of the magic, because they go up close and then they'll see the artwork, the sculpture, and then they are struck by what it's made from. And they can come to that on their own terms about where it's, and they know where it's coming from. So that's the story on Big Daddy.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. It's great. It's really wonderful to kind of look inside the fish too, to see how you have created that. And I guess, you know, the expression upcycling is what this kind of art would be referred to. Is that, would you say that's right?
Right. So we call it upsculpting. It's a combination of upcycling and sculpture.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yep.
And
in our case, we're using marine debris, to be more specific. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but yeah.
Thank you. And it's probably, sadly, you have an abundance of materials to work with, I guess.
Yeah. Yes.
I have to, you know, kind of pause at the moment and give a shout out to one of the artists in the show that's actually not on the panel tonight, because his work is inspired from a similar sensibility as Cindy's, and that's Tom Denninger, who has created a number of birds that are three-dimensional. And as you walk around the sculptures, you see on one side what looks like just a mess of recycled materials, and then as you come, you know, right in front of it, you know, a bird magically appears. So that's kind of a shout out to one of our fellow artists in the show, and an encouragement for those who haven't yet seen the show to go to see not only our work, but his works as well.
That's wonderful work. It's really cool. People need to see it.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah. So I'll talk just a moment about my own work as kind of rounding out the group here, the photographer among us. The work that you're going to see was done for the Peconic Land Trust, and it's called Spring Evening Light Wilson's Grove. So, you know, my processes as a photographer have changed over time. Obviously, initially I worked primarily with film, and now I work primarily digitally, although I do still work with the 2.25 film camera. But this particular work was done digitally. And as part of the plein air Peconic group that Yvette mentioned earlier, we had a dozen artists, of which I was one of 2 photographers, who would exhibit shows regularly, showing, painting or photographing preserved landscapes that the Peconic Land Trust had preserved. And so in that situation, I felt that I was challenged to show work that kind of went beyond just your traditional two-dimensional photograph on paper. So back several years ago, I partnered with the Polaroid Corporation to use their film to create Polaroid transfers. And for those of you who remember that technique, it actually produces a lovely watercolor-like image of the photograph that you have taken. And so I have gone into the digital realm, trying to replicate that same sort of appearance, where you get something that's a little bit different than just a straight photograph. And so that explains a little bit of the background of this particular piece.
That's beautiful.
Now, I want to emphasize that each of the artists here do quite a bit of other work, so that they describe their process for the work that they showed you, but throughout the evening, you'll hear a little more maybe about other processes that they work in. So I'm going to ask us now to sort of look at nature as inspiration, and to hear from each of the artists how nature actually informs their work. And let's start with Anne this time. I think there may be 1 or 2 images that you can show to describe, Anne, how you get from nature, how nature informs the work that you create.
That's cool. Sure, yeah, I'd be delighted. But the image number 4 is maybe it's the one just in front of the one you're showing. Maybe help set the scene. I mentioned that this is outside my studio, and one of the larger campuses that I'm, using the formations in the grass and the slant of the hillside to give shape to these white rivulets. You'll notice right beyond the lawn is a meadow that we have, which I've grown over the last nearly 10 years to understand that a meadow is not an empty lot. It is a space in transition, just like wetlands and many of the other spaces on the East End that, where nature is always shifting from sort of one state to another in a really beautiful way. And I think it activates what we see, that sense of, is it this or that? And the shifting, in mythology, for example, things always happen in a meadow. People get, gods take the nymphs, or something changes from one state to another, set in a meadow. And I, as I said, over the last 10 years, that's become really important to my thinking and my work. I think it's this very, and as I mentioned in my, studio processes, that kind of almost unsettling visceralness is what I look for in my paintings. And the second image that you had started with, Yvette, is, so this is that same piece of canvas in the studio, and nature, art, and the body. I think, are we separate from nature? Are we part of nature? And I think our body is how we are connected to nature. We know, how ephemeral our life is. We know, our sense of health, certainly over the last year, how precarious our place is in the world through our body. So, how that translates into the artwork is through scale. I'm sort of, wrestling and moving and engaging with my work in this, and very aware of, my relationship, my body in relationship to the work, and then by extension, how that connects with nature. So that's just, sort of a, an introduction to this feeling of how I think my art connects to, nature through my work and the landscape around us.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Anne. First of all, I'm going to put on my activist cap and say thank you for mentioning that a meadow is not is an active space. I have to say one of my least favorite terms in the environmental movement is open space. No space is open space. Every space has its active importance to the ecosystems around, whether it's agricultural farmland, whether it's forested space. And yeah, we are nature. We are part of nature. So, Anne, thanks for mentioning that. So Cindy, maybe you could talk a few moments about how nature informs your art, and maybe even, obviously we saw what you showed us before, but even earlier inspirations from nature that now are evident in your chosen artistic career.
I also want to say, Anne, yes, on that active space, I think that's really cool. Like I can see making a big sign and putting them in meadows. It can be a movement, right? Active space. I like that. So I get inspired by other people all the time. In this case, nature has always been a major force in my life. As far back as I can remember, I always found myself being comforted by going into nature. I grew up in a pretty big family, and I would go and find peace out in the fields around me. where I lived or the woods. And as I was older and moved to the South Fork, I would walk along the fields and and this particular painting is done in encaustic. It's a hot wax process. It's called Heaven and Earth Transcendence, and it evokes the feeling that I get and I got when I would walk through these fields and I would see them freshly plowed in the spring, and it would bring up this beautiful fog because we were so close to the ocean. So the coolness of the ocean and the warmth of the soil in the spring would bring up this ground fog. And to me, it looked like, heaven on earth and in earth. And I put gold in the foreground, and I also put soil from the fields itself into the work, which you can do in encaustic. You can embed things in the wax, and it's really a wonderful medium to work in. And I did a series of that. So yes, I take long walks all the time in the woods. I love to do that, or along the beach. And I find it incredibly meditative and incredibly relaxing. And also it seems to kind of open up a creative conduit for me. So I think a great deal when I'm doing those things.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, I think especially in our age where people are far too often, staring at their cell phones or totally involved in the work effort that they're doing, we don't have those extended times for creative inspiration. So it's nice to hear, Cindy, you say that walks either in the forest or on the shorefront provide you that. And I mean, would you say that's essential as an artist?
I'd say it's essential for me as an artist. It 100% informs my work. I'd also like to say I firmly believe that nature is a source of healing, and that it is people are taking baths in the woods now, forest bathing, and we all know how good we feel when we take a walk on the beach. I mean, I think that if you open yourself up to it and take that kind of time, you'll find that you're just far more centered, usually, from nature. I am, I know that, but I do think it's a source of healing, and it really drives my work.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that into the room, the healing aspect of nature. Scott, you started out talking about a walk in the Hither Hills, I think it was, where you saw that beautiful oak. So tell us a little more maybe about your own nature's own influence on you and on your work.
I think, like the rest of the artists on the panel, being immersed in the actual essence of a landscape is really my primary inspiration. And that does also include walking on the beach, being in the ocean itself. I'm a huge surfer, wave riding, but then also being in the woods. Foraging is a really fun pastime that I was just out earlier today, picking mushrooms and other wild foods, identifying trees, learning more about bird watching, which is another kind of a new passion of mine. And I just find nature kind of infinitely inspiring because it represents everything that's inside us and outside us in so many ways. But for me, it does start in so many ways by just taking observation as one of the key elements. And you see just the wonders of creation when you look into a leaf or look at blades of grass or insects and insect wings, or maybe how they could all be related. And to me, they are. So, and I like to take aspects of those different things and kind of explore them further and combine them again with other ideas. So it's always a dialogue.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I like to tell my photography students that really nothing is uninteresting if you look at it long enough. And
Right.
No matter where you are, there's always something that can be infinitely fascinating. I wonder if you saw this kind of a bird on any of your walks recently.
So actually, this is it's a whale skeleton. That's a blue whale that I saw. Actually, it was in California, in somewhere outside of Santa Cruz, at an ocean institute. and whales for me have always been just very like one of the most fascinating creatures, and they're featured pretty prominently in my work. For so many reasons, A being that they are mammals like us. And this piece is also about whales, and the fact that they can, this piece in particular, it's about the fact that they can create life for so many other life forms. Well, this piece itself was actually inspired by a walk in the woods in Maine, where I saw the rocks, the striations on the rocks, and glacial action made it seem like it could almost be whale skin, and that was actually the shape of the rocks that were smoothed out and reminded me of a sperm whale. And unfortunately, they do wash up from time to time, and that's actually been a feature in a lot of Western art. Is the beached whale, and there's a lot of metaphor behind it. So I like to explore those kind of same themes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for giving us a little bit of the background on this particular creature. And it reminds me a little bit of, the redwood forest and the nurse log. When the redwoods fall and die, they become a nursing log for hundreds, if not thousands, of other species to grow and to enhance the ecosystem there. Talk a little more about observation, because I think at the root of almost all art forms rests observation. Do you carry a notebook? Like, for instance, when you were in Maine, did you make a sketch? Did you take a photograph? Or tell us a little bit more about observation and how its importance to you.
I mostly use photography and cameras, and if something really strikes my interest, I take a lot of photos and a lot of different light and a lot of details, and far close up and far away. Occasionally I'll sketch because I just find it more immediate, so that I can capture something and then just really look at it. But if I am doing an in-depth kind of observational drawing, then yes, I'm fully committed to taking something in. If it's like, say, an object or a landscape, and that's, I think, the best way you can learn about something is to draw it. Like this is actually a dolphin skull here that I observed from life, and just drawing it is really, you've learned about anatomy, of course, and the curves of every little piece, and how things fit together, and how that creature works, or that organism is built. And you still have this idea of this mystery behind it. And these are pink lady slippers, and those were also drawn from life, but not at the same time. So again, combining different things.
Yeah, getting back to what Anne mentioned earlier about the contrasting elements, I like this. And, for myself, I'll say that you mentioned light. I mean, for photographers, it really is all about light. And, photography itself means drawing with light. So I have to say that standing in the landscape, at the end of the day or early in the morning, and just seeing the way the light bathes the land or the water, depending on where you are, or the forested area, it really, I find it to be a moment not only of transcendence, but of sort of some connection of a spiritual nature, both to the divine or the divine within nature. And I realized when I first moved out here, going back several decades, that what it was that drew me to the area literally was the light on the open landscape. On the agricultural farms, on the waters. And so that's what I often look for when I go out to photograph, though I also like to say that there's really no bad light. And so, for instance, a foggy day, similar to what Cindy had described with her encaustic piece, does create sort of an otherworldly atmosphere that I find very fruitful for making photographs, because they then also lend itself to more metaphoric interpretations. And so I find the use of light to be wonderful. And I also have to kind of step back and give a shout out to, where did this come from? It didn't come just from me, myself, but, my heritage and my ancestors have been, come from the Irish landscape, which, the Irish are inextricably bound to the land. And also my father, who loved the landscape, would always take me out when I was young. We would go for long drives in the country, where I grew up in rural Maryland. And those things are absolutely at play in my eye. I mean, I think what informs what I look at comes from something that's kind of deeper within me than I really maybe have a full understanding of. So that's my relationship with nature. So now we're gonna kind of turn ourselves back a little bit to this whole concept of working with found objects, because a couple of the artists here do that quite a bit, both Cindy and Scott, and I think Anne does it a little bit as well. So we're going to talk about both how you integrate the found objects in works, and also if there are artists that use them in the past that may be a source of inspiration for you, or just artists who are a source of inspiration for you in general. So that's a mouthful, I realize. So maybe I'll ask Cindy to talk first about the use of found objects in her work, a little beyond maybe what you did before, if you have a slide that would reference that.
I think that I think we should go with the first one, but I'm going to go with a little bit more of who I was influenced by. So there's Big Daddy, of course. So we talked about the tuna, and I think everybody knows that I work with these marine plastics that I find, and some other slides coming up will show that a little bit more in depth too. But I was heavily influenced on reusing things and upcycling things and creating art by my mother and also by my grandparents. I grew up in a house that wasted nothing. And my mom was very creative, so she would make things all the time. And my grandparents were very frugal with natural resources and with just about everything that wasn't thrown out. It was reused in the house, from, I'm sure a lot of people can relate, the baby jars that hold all the little screws and nuts and that kind of thing. But moving on, a very dear friend of mine, David Ellis, who lives on Cape Cod, who's a wonderful assemblage artist and would find all of these amazing things on the beach and collect them and create and has created artwork. And he was a very big influence on me. He taught me not only about just by looking at his work, how to compose with these different objects, but also he is an environmentalist who loves the water and loves his community, and heavily influenced me, is I guess I'd like to say about that. Yeah, so it's not really, in this case, not really about my work, but about the people and the people that influenced me, I wanted to say.
Yeah, this is a great piece. I like it. It reminds me also a little of a Joseph Cornell box, but yeah, very, very nice. And
Yeah.
Scott, you have branched out into different ways of using found objects in your art. Why don't you tell us?
Well, for example, I'll just bring up the kelp lamp, one just below, or we could talk about the Pundyk blind here, actually. This is kind of a culmination of a lot of found objects work that I've done over the years, where like Cindy, I've been beachcombing for years. And I think that's actually how I first met Cindy and knew of her work. And it's because I was picking up not just plastic objects, but all sorts of things on the beach, and then really trying to wonder where they came from, like what they were, and then, how to stop it, because this is such a problem. And over the years, I've made many things, but what you're looking at here is actually a small house that it was made to look like a duck blind. It's called the Pundyk blind, and it's a floating installation. And it does actually use a number of found objects, including a lot of salvaged wood. You'll see a window there. It looks like a bubble on the left side of the house itself is actually a salad bowl. It's floating on industrial barrels that were reused from, I think it was mulch dye. And And then you can barely see it, but there's a giant window on the other side that's actually built from a geodesic dome that was a jungle gym, which I outfitted with plexiglass and became this large kind of portal window. And I found that on the side of the road. A lot of these things I find, and I'm always a scavenger, and for better or worse, I collect a lot of this stuff. So, but it always finds its way into some kind of project, or and in this case, it kind of all came together monumentally. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the blind in a later topic.
Will you talk about the wallpaper?
Yeah, and the wallpaper too is not a found object, but it actually comprises a number of my pen and ink drawings over the years, and I put it together into this repeat pattern, and it's actually a wallpaper design. It's a little tongue in cheek because it's the bubs, or that's what the people of Bonnet call themselves, who are the residents of Springs area of East Hampton, are not overly fancy people. They're fishermen, they're farmers, they're baymen, they're kind of salt of the earth people. And toile, I call this Bonnet toile, is kind of a sign of the upper class and the elite and the bourgeois. So that was kind of an ironic take and outfitting this structure with the wallpaper.
It's great.
Is this at right now at the Parish Museum, or will it be there soon?
It's not at the Parish. It's actually moved to the Lieber collection in Springs.
Okay, great.
So it was at the Parish. Yep.
All right. For folks who might want to see it, go to the
Yep.
Lieber.
Yeah, you can actually visit it, and they're open on Saturdays, Sundays, and Wednesdays.
Thank you. And how about you?
Sure. Yeah, I should say I was at the Lieber Museum last week, and I saw your piece, Scott. It was great to see. So there's number 6. I don't do a lot of assemblage art, but I come, the tradition of collage, which is all assemblage and collage is basically taking things that have a different context and bringing them together and seeing what happens, and all the associations from the kind of original source are brought together and something new is made. So this is a drop cloth canvas painting, the first one that I made, and I consider it in a way a found object because it was and this ties into, I think, the way all of us maybe have come to activism in different ways, which is it's out of necessity, a problem solving situation where you're confronted with something and you have to, figure your way out of it. So I wanted to paint a wall in a gallery in the Lower East Side, and the gallery director said I couldn't actually change the color of the wall. So I went back to my studio and looked down, and on the floor was this 12 by 15 foot drop cloth canvas that I was using to protect the floor. And I thought, well, that could be my wall surface. And then I ended up creating this painting, which is now it's the only material I use for my paintings. And I think the way it connects to assemblage or collage is that I am a painter. I look to the tradition of painting. I mean, all of us as artists look to, where we come from an aesthetic sense, and who are our influences and who have said things that we want to build on. And so the traditional materials of painting you think of are, for example, the stretch canvas and the use of the different medium. I use water-based medium, and the sense of creating an object preconceived with a structure isn't something that I'm interested in. I like the discovery of working from the inside out, where if I start a painting, I'm really not sure what its dimensions are going to be, and they're determined by the gestures of the paint and the different steps as far as forming the image. So this is my found object.
Yeah, great. Hey, I love that. You can't paint the wall. Well, then you just use your drop cloth and you have, bingo, you have a wall and you have a ground for your artwork. Again, being creative with what you're confronted with is always the challenge of the artists. And so, you know, but we've all been doing work, some of us longer than others, but we've all been doing our artwork for many years and have evolved within that context. And in terms of how the activism aspect of our work has become integrated and changed over time is what we'd like to talk about for a few moments. I think maybe we should go to Cindy first, maybe to talk a little bit about, I think we are going to see maybe something that each of the artist has done in the past, and then something that they've done now to kind of.
Not that one, not that one. Go 28. Yeah, perfect.
Take it away.
All right, so this is my first Moby. I think I'm on like Moby 10 by now. But I do have a long acquaintance with a gallery in Nantucket, and they love me bringing a new Moby in every year. So this is the first whale I did. I had drawings of whales in my sketchbooks. As I started working with the materials, I was creating wreaths initially out of the marine plastics that I was picking up off of the beach, and wanted to do a whale. And here it is. And so you can see every single little piece on it, the little round discs are from filters that came from a water treatment plant that overflowed years and years ago, and we are still finding them on the beach today. That's probably, those probably 12 years ago, maybe. So this is my first Moby. And then we're going to go to the second one. You can see how really primitive it is compared to this one, which is a humpback whale. And again, everything is 100% picked up off of the beach. But now what you're seeing is years later, I'm working with the materials. I've been working with the materials for years, and I'm realizing that I can do a lot more with ropes than just wrapping it around, you know, something. Basically, I can take them apart. They're like an embroidery thread. I mean, they just can come apart and become smaller and smaller and used. So you can see we use, this is actually a lacrosse stitch on the belly of this humpback whale. And so you can just, for example, that's a painting tarp that is the skin that I dug out of a marsh. And this is the interior. The fins are interiors of a tow line, and they look like a silk rug when they've been laundered and worked with. That's a indoor-outdoor carpet that I found, and the tail is really how we found it. Of course, it's cut off of the piece.
Great.
But that was an indoor-outdoor carpet. So you can see, and this is the spout is monofilament fishing line, and the side is all bottles and bottle caps that are all degraded. There's a pregnancy testing kit in there, and so that shows you that stuff. And as you open it up, there's actually water bottles in there. It's
yeah.
Mhm.
That's amazing, the amount of the evolution from the first one to this. And of course, I can't resist mentioning the fisherman off of Wellfleet in Provincetown that was swallowed by, not swallowed, excuse me, that was actually in the jaws and the mouth of a whale this past week. I hope everyone's read about that. It's an amazing story which he lived to tell, a modern day Jonah in the whale.
Right.
So. And it just a hat tip to the fact that we do a Moby Dick marathon, and we're going to do it in September. So
I'll have to get you a Moby for your table.
Excellent. We'd love that.
I'd like to, if I might just say one thing,
Yeah.
You mentioned Provincetown, is that I do partner with the Coastal Studies program in Provincetown and get a lot of rope from their marine debris removal program. So when I do use a lot of rope in my work, I have created DIY kits. And I usually make a trip up there about once a year or once every 2 years and get a truckload of ropes from them.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And how about yourself? You have some slides to show us your evolution.
I do, but I have to ask, so you do a reading of the entire book of Moby Dick?
Absolutely. We've been doing it since 1983. We do it every other year.
Are you are you taking volunteers for?
Oh yeah, we're actively, let's not, I don't want to, we'll be in touch about that. I'll drop
Great.
it in the chat and we would.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This idea of sort of how our activism evolves, I was thinking about it, and I have to say, my parents showed me the importance of being, civically involved, and growing up, different causes, the Vietnam War, different instances of, social injustice have always been, the importance of being involved and taking action have, it's been part of my life, for always. And it's interesting to notice sort of, how, what particular events or, moments in history that, draw us in to connect with. So I picked this piece from 2018. It's called Astrophore Tattoo. It's actually up at the East End Arts Center now, the Detour 2 art show through September 5th. So you'll notice it's an unstretched canvas. There's the panels, sort of vertical panels that I've sewn. But for me, for almost a year and a half, I only used different shades of blue between 2016 and 18. And I really wasn't able to even pick up another color. And everything that I came out of my hands and out of the studio was associated with this sort of indigo cast of blue. And I associate that with a kind of retreat from society, as opposed to, a stepping into society and taking action. And I think it's important to note that, as activists, there's usually, you think, you're up against something. In some cases, there's a sense of powerlessness and even, disappointment in a lapsed authority figure. Like, how can a town let, some atrocity, some environmental atrocity happen? So, there's almost a sense of mourning that goes alongside activism, because you might not always succeed. So this painting, is about that sort of inward looking, almost, alternative to activism. So, and then the next painting, which is in the Southampton Arts Center, which is from this year. It's called I Had Meant to Have Dancing. And it's, I literally can remember the moment when I thought I could be drawn back into using a broader color palette and this, as we talked about these, the interconnectivity of us with nature and the different, sense of biodiversity that I think these interconnecting shapes are. Obviously, the blue is still here as a background, but I associate this work with the work I've been doing for Save Mattatuck Inlet. There's a proposed project cutting down 500 trees and taking out a whole hillside of sand and putting up 2 football field size industrial buildings to store yachts right on the edge of the inlet. And we've galvanized the community. We're working with the Southold Town Planning Board to fight this. But as opposed to the other painting that I was showing you, where it was a sort of, introspective moment, this is, I really feel that take the activism that I'm, working on, this grassroots project is pulsing throughout in the, way I use color and form in my work.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Thanks for filling us in a little bit about that project. That's very important work that you're involved with. And, Scott, I know you're involved with it in a number of different ways. So why don't you talk a little bit about how your art activism has evolved?
Through the years, I've really taken different aspects of things that I've been interested in, whether it's social rights or environmentalism. And I try to put that into my art. Here's a piece actually that depicts Plum Island, and it's from a project I did called the Forbidden Islands Project. And it's a realistic kind of depiction of the island itself, but it's kind of this isn't more about activism per se, but if we can go to the Bonnick blind, that piece is actually a multi kind of faceted comment on a number of different things, including housing crisis, housing unaffordability. It's a tongue-in-cheek kind of take on the fact that there is none in the Hamptons and this entire area. It's also a comment on climate change and sea level rise, and the fact that it's an adaptable structure. It actually rises and falls on the tide itself. And it's also about the displacement of the people of the area due to both of these reasons. So that includes their ways of life are disappearing, and that includes fishing, with fish migration and warmer waters, which actually result in less catch, and encroachment by a lot of different factors, including just essentially wealthier people driving up home prices where these people can't really afford to live in the same place where they have for generations and generations. So it's a multifaceted kind of take on all these issues, which I do find interrelated. And the more I look, the more I see connections between all of these crises of our times. And I've been more and more interested in how I can inject my work with direct comments about these things that I am concerned with.
Yeah, first of all, the work is wonderful, and all issues are interrelated. There's no question about it. And the more you look at it, the more you realize that. The housing issue I have also worked on for a long time, and it's one of the most intractable issues that we deal with locally. But Scott, did you have another piece to show, or if not, that's fine, we can move forward.
Sure, well, this is actually a recent piece. Did you want to see one from before, from earlier?
Why don't you talk about this recent piece?
Yeah, this. So I've been playing a lot with kelp, sugar kelp, which is a native species to both the Long Island Sound and coastal ocean waters. And it's been getting a lot of attention lately because it is an extremely sustainable food source. It's nutritious and very high in vitamins and very healthy to eat, but it's also sequesters carbon and also cleans the water column. And for a lot of different reasons, kelp and other seaweeds could be a huge help to not only our environment, but to health and to also local industry as a new farmed sea vegetable is what they like to call it now. I've been collecting kelp for years now in Montauk, and I also recently discovered that it's quality that looks great as a lamp. So here I am actually making a lamp or lamp shade from dried kelp itself, and I'm stretching it around what I believe is actually an old dish rack. So this is another example of a found object where I found a lot of kind of wire frames and stretched kelp around it, and it's cool because it actually dries in that shape, and there's a light bulb in there. So it is a functioning lamp, and it's interesting, and it's a conversation piece also.
Well, it also, kelp lights the way of the future. So that's a nice sort of obvious metaphor there. But, I like hearing what you say and what the other artists have said about the fact that these issues, whether it's climate, whether it's housing, whether it's justice issues, can be abstract, can be difficult for individuals to really necessarily engage with. But when artists use their creativity to visualize it in a way that really brings it home, it allows people another and a clear way into understanding issues. So thank you all for doing that. Just a little bit about my own evolution as an artist, because I have to give a shout out to the group for the East End that was at the time the group for the South Fork. while I was working on my Vanishing Landscape series, I went into their office and realized that looking at the zoning maps that on, let's say on Scuttle Hole Road, which was then really all farmland, that underlying almost all of the land were subdivided maps, which meant that, you know, at some point, maybe not that year, but maybe years later, they would turn into being a, hang on a second, my phone is beeping at me. Yeah, they would turn into, you know, luxury subdivisions, which it actually has. So that kind of led my art to my activism back then when I made that discovery. And so how to use the artwork, my photography to make a statement and to make something, an aesthetically compelling statement has been then the challenge. I have done essays like Then and Now, which you see here, showing what an area looked like before it was developed. And I found that interesting, but also to an extent very depressing. At that point, I pivoted and did some work with the Quail Hill, which is part of Peconic Land Trust. I thought, let me photograph a landscape that has been preserved and that will remain in active agriculture. So for a year, I photographed Quail Hill Farm, which introduced me to the Land Trust, and that's how I became involved with the Plein Air Peconic Group. But I was still searching for a more aesthetically interesting way to show my even broader concerns beyond just the development of the landscape. And I have a new series, or another series called Witness, which have photographs the burlap trees that we've seen just exploding on our landscape over the past 5+ years. And I found that with the figures and that are created via the use of the burlap, that it became an apt metaphor for a lot of what's going on in our world. People wrapped up in each other, or rather in themselves, you know, via social media. The hiding of the trees, which should be really free and everyone should be able to look at. And just a lot about people at the margins having to hide. So I found that the Witness series and the use of photographing these wrapped trees worked nicely to try to convey that message, and using converting them into black and white and sepia tone also worked quite well.
Yeah.
So
strong.
That's one way that I've attempted to take the work into different areas. At this point, we're almost at 1:15, and we had one other question. I'm going to do a lightning round, and really, we're going to just have like maybe 30 seconds each. We wanted to talk about the power of art and maybe an instance when one of your pieces changed the viewer and the viewer's impression. If anybody has a piece that they would like to comment on it, but we have to keep it really short, 15 to 30 seconds. I know that's a challenge, and let me ask Anne to maybe start first, if you would.
Yeah, let's see, there's right number 9. So the painting, The Seed Knows How to Wait, which I showed, which are the red circles. Last winter, I visualized it taking shape out in the backyard. So these flags are forming the 3 circles, and I created a performance. I wanted the audience to actually be able to participate and move inside this expanded painting the way I do in my studio. And I have a quote from one of the people that came to see the dance performance that we did. The flag field performance opened up my senses to an appreciation of space and the way organisms move through it. Like ants navigating rooted blades of grass, the dancers move gracefully through openness and within permeable boundaries. So I feel like I was able to communicate what I wanted to about these themes of interconnectedness.
Great, thank you. Yeah, you're right on time there. Cindy, you're up.
Okay, the gyre chandelier. So my work, I wanted to create a piece that to talk about the gyres, the ocean gyres that are in the ocean, that you've heard about the They're like the size of Texas with the plastics floating in the ocean. And this is an upcycled airplane filter. And I used fiber optics. My work has jumped into using technology to tell a story, and that's all ocean plastics hanging down. It is in a permanent, exhibit in New York City. Thousands of people have seen it and will continue to see it. And it messages all around about gyres and ocean gyres and the dangers of plastics. And my voice is in there as well, talking about it. So it's really, it's really a wonderful vehicle to be able to use your art as a way to tell a difficult story and engage people.
Thank you. Thank you. It's beautiful, really beautiful.
Thank you.
And Scott, how about you?
I'll talk about that kelp lamp again for a second, because it's amazing that a lot of people just have no idea what kelp is, and other than maybe they've experienced it in like a Japanese kind of dish, and they don't realize that it's native and that that it's so healthy, and that it could potentially help our clean the waters in such a critical way. Which I want to touch on, that it can actually sequester carbon, of course, and also nitrogen and heavy metals, which and nitrogen especially is a huge problem out here. And when I talk about this, people's minds are like really opened up to the possibilities of working with nature in one way, which is out of so many different ways, that this is something that I think everyone can do and take part in. So.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. I really appreciate your bringing the whole into the conversation kelp and what it can do to help. And there's a lot of initiatives now, and hopefully the people here will go out and look into that themselves. So I'll just wrap up myself. I often hear when people talk about the landscapes, they say that, I drive by that particular landscape all the time, and I never really noticed it until, I saw your photograph of it, which is to me a way of indicating that I've succeeded in capturing something that is quintessential about the beauty and the majesty of the particular landscape. And one other comment I'd like to make about the series that I produced on the Turnpike, Champton Today, Life Along the Turnpike. It was a way for, you can just leave it on this event, you don't have to show the other one. I was the one who really learned in a way more than maybe the people looking at the photographs. For the course of several years, I documented the African-American community in Bridgehampton. And it was a revelatory experience for me in terms of learning, making friends, learning about the community. And then in exhibiting the work, hearing both the people in the community appreciative of the way in which the photographs depicted their lives, and also those who, sadly we live in a community that's just far too segregated. All of Long Island is, and we need to work to change that. But for those who aren't in the community who looked at the photographs, they really appreciated learning about the community. And I think it helped create a bond, or if not a bond, a bridge between the different communities. So, gosh, that's all we had prepared, which is hopefully satisfying to those of you who are listening. Yvette, I don't know if there's any questions that can be put out there, but I'll toss it back to you to take it over.
I will encourage it. It was amazing. I was captivated the whole time. We had a practice session, and I thought I learned a lot at that point, but I've learned so much more about the work, the integration with nature, the environment, your activism, and I applaud you all. What you're doing is truly inspiring for me. There is one question out there, and so I'll pose that, and I will encourage. So we'll keep this open for a few more minutes. So if people want to ask a question, I really encourage you to do so. And maybe we could do this in a quick roundabout way, but the question is, how do you balance art and activism? Or do you balance it, or rather more through different spaces, activities? And are there some environmental images, for example, of destruction, that just cannot be made into art? It's a kind of a multi-layered question. So I don't know if anybody wants to jump in and take it on.
Well, while folks think about it, I'm going to jump in and just not talk about my own work, but about another artist who I have tremendous respect for, and that's the photographer Sebastião Salgado. And this will refer to the part of the question, is there something that is just too difficult to take on in art? And Salgado photographed the Rwanda genocide, and in a way that was difficult to look at, but also achingly, heartbreakingly beautiful. So I think it can be a challenge, but I think that perhaps art can find a way. And just parenthetically, I'll add that after his effort in Rwanda, it practically killed him, and it took him a year to recover. But what he brought to the world helped change that situation. So that's my offering.
Yeah, I talked to Sean Erickson, who had the show at the Blue Sphere show at the Southampton Arts Center. And I asked him how he did it, because he goes behind the scenes. He was the creator of Racing Extinction, and has seen some incredibly difficult images, and goes and does it in and out year after year. And I said, how do you do it? Because I will say that I know even with my work, at times it's very depressing, some of the things that I learn and I come across. And he said that thank God he had a good family he could go home to and recoup from. So I don't think that there's anything off limits, but I do think it is the artist that takes it on has to be incredibly strong and have the ability to be able to assimilate it and move it through their body in a way so that they're not owning it when they're finished with the series. I think it's tough work. There's no question about it.
It's a good question. The psychology of agency is something that I think about a lot, and that's, how is it that we find, the way to take action as an individual. So I think, it's complex. I think art can give you that sense of agency, and it comes about in different ways, I'm sure, for everyone.
So I have a final thought regarding that. One of the essays that you mentioned, Yvette, is Black and Green, and I've been photographing the coal region of Eastern Pennsylvania, where the landscape is tremendously scarred. To go from the East End to that landscape where instead of, the tan sand, we have really black hillsides everywhere, is quite remarkable and mind shifting. But like with Salgado's work, not that I'm comparing myself to him, there is you can find some beauty, terrible beauty in the form that you're presented with there. So I've endeavored to do that with that essay. So I guess any other questions, or anyone else wish to make a last statement about that we haven't been able to get to?
All right.
Or should we all have a beer? At the corner bar.
Greenport Brewery here.
Okay, excellent. All right, Anne's already started. That's great.
It's lemonade, but whatever.
Okay, darn. Thank you all. I think this was wonderful. Really appreciate your time and your talents.
Thank you, Kathryn, for being our fearless leader here, and everybody else. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Yeah,
I just,
thank you all.
everyone.
This was great.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
say on behalf of us, thank you. I mean, this was amazing. Kathryn, you led a conversation, and Scott and Cindy, thank you for sharing what's inspiring you, and the resilience that you show, and being able to take in the landscape and provide a sense of beauty, but also important messages. And so thank you all. I thank everybody for joining us tonight. And a reminder, we've recorded this, and so we'll be posting it on our website. So feel free to circle back and enjoy it again, or share it with your friends, and check out our calendar of upcoming programs. And we hope to see you again soon. And everyone have a wonderful evening and a great upcoming weekend and wonderful summer season. So
Go to the show.
Go to the show.
Go to the show.
Yes, go to the show.
All right. All
And
right.
Cindy, Scott, thank you. I learned a lot. Wow, this is awesome.
Right.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.